When Clint Eastwood walked onto the Tonight Show stage on October 12, 1973, Johnny Carson did something he had never done in 3,427 episodes of hosting. He looked directly at Clint's extended hand, and with 30 million Americans watching live, he said three words that made Ed McMahon's cigarette fall from his lips. "Not this time." The audience of 322 people inside Studio One at NBC Burbank went completely silent. Clint Eastwood, the man who never flinched in front of cameras, stood frozen with his hand hanging in the air, his famous squint tightened. The orchestra stopped mid-note. Even Doc Severinsen lowered his trumpet and stared in confusion. But what Johnny whispered next into his microphone made Clint Eastwood's legendary tough guy mask crack for the first time on national television. And the secret he revealed would change everything America thought they knew about both men. Because 6 hours earlier, a telegram had arrived at Johnny's office. A telegram from a dying man in a Veterans Affairs hospital in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. A man named Sergeant William Morrison. A man Johnny Carson and Clint Eastwood both knew, but had sworn never to speak about publicly for 21 years. The telegram contained a black and white photograph. Three young men in military fatigues standing on a Korean hillside in 1952. Two of them would become the most famous faces in American entertainment. One of them would die alone in a hospital bed believing the world had forgotten him. What Johnny was about to reveal would either destroy both their carefully built public images forever, or it would prove that some promises are kept in silence until the moment a dying man sets you free. The handshake everyone expected would have to wait. Because Johnny Carson owed this man something bigger than a greeting. He owed him the truth about a night in Korea when a farm boy from Nebraska saved two terrified young soldiers and made them promise something that shaped the next 2 decades of their lives. And it all started 24 hours earlier when that yellow telegram arrived with 2 words at the top in red ink. Urgent personal. If this story already has you hooked, do me a favor. Hit that like button right now and drop a comment telling me where in the world you're watching this from. And trust me, you're going to want to see how this unfolds. Let's go. October 11th, 1973, 2:17 in the afternoon. Johnny Carson sat alone in his office on the 3rd floor of NBC Studios in Burbank, California. An Emmy Award sat on the shelf behind him. A Karnak, the magnificent turban, hung on a coat hook. A half-SM smoked cigarette burned in the ashtray on his desk. His secretary knocked twice and entered without waiting for permission. She knew Johnny's schedule by heart, and interruptions like this never happened unless something was wrong. "This just came by courier, Mr. Carson," she said quietly, handing him a Western Union telegram. "It's marked urgent." Johnny looked at the yellow paper, the red urgent stamp across the top, the Iowa postmark. His hands started shaking before he even opened it. The first line hit him like a punch to the stomach. "Johnny, it's Dutch Morrison. I'm dying. Stage 4 lung cancer. VA Hospital, Cedar Rapids. Doctors say 2 weeks maximum, maybe less." Johnny's cigarette slipped from his fingers and landed on the desk, still burning. He didn't notice. He kept reading. "Clint Eastwood is booked on your show tomorrow, October 12th. Before you shake his hand, there's something America needs to know about Korea. About what really happened on Hill 418, about the promise we three made. I'm releasing you both from your oath. Tell them the truth. They need to know we existed. Tell them the forgotten soldiers mattered. Dutch." Johnny stood up so fast his chair rolled backward and hit the wall. For 11 years he had hosted The Tonight Show. For 11 years he had perfected the image of the charming, funny, safe Midwestern guy who made America laugh before bed. He never talked about Korea. NBC executives had made it clear, "Keep it light, Johnny. America doesn't want heavy." But Dutch Morrison was dying, and Dutch was releasing him from a 21-year promise of silence. Johnny walked to his desk and unlocked the bottom drawer. Inside was a small metal box he'd kept since 1954. He hadn't opened it in years, but he'd never thrown it away either. His hands trembled as he lifted the lid. A purple heart medal, not his. It belonged to Sergeant William Morrison. A faded photograph. 3 young men in combat fatigues, arms around each other's shoulders, forcing smiles for a camera in Seoul, South Korea. December 1951, Johnny was 26, Clint was 21, Dutch was 28, and a set of dog tags stamped with the name Morrison William J. The dog tags Dutch had pressed into Johnny's hand in a military hospital in March 1952 with a single instruction. Hold these for me until I ask for them back. Dutch never asked for them back. He just kept serving. 3 tours in Korea, 2 in Vietnam, 23 years total. He retired in 1968 and disappeared into a small town in Iowa. Never married, never sought attention, never told his story. Johnny picked up his office phone and dialed the operator. "Get me Clint Eastwood's agent in Los Angeles. Tell him it's Johnny Carson and it's an emergency." 20 minutes later, Johnny hung up the phone. Clint had received the same telegram, the same release from their promise, and Clint had said the exact same thing Johnny was thinking. It's time. Dutch earned this. Johnny rewrote the opening of tomorrow's show. He told his producers there would be a format change they wouldn't understand until it happened, and he slipped Dutch's Purple Heart into his jacket pocket for the first time since 1954. What Johnny didn't know was that Clint Eastwood was doing the exact same thing 347 mi south in Carmel, California. And what neither of them knew was that Dutch Morrison's telegram contained one more secret. A secret that wouldn't be revealed until the cameras were rolling live. October 12, 1973, 4:30 in the afternoon, NBC Studios, Burbank. The Tonight Show all was taped at 5:30 p.m. for broadcast at 11:30 that same night. Johnny Carson arrived early. He always did, but today his dressing room door stayed closed. Clint Eastwood arrived at 4:45 p.m. 90 minutes before his scheduled segment. For a man famous for being exactly on time and nothing more, this was unusual. The stage manager noticed, the makeup artist noticed, Ed McMahon definitely noticed. Ed knocked on Johnny's dressing room door. "Johnny, you all right in there? You've been locked in for an hour." Johnny's voice came through the door. "I'm fine, Ed. Just trust me tonight. Something's going to happen and I need you to roll with it." Ed frowned. In 11 years of working together, Johnny had never sounded like this. "What's going on? You'll understand when it happens." In the green room, Clint Eastwood sat alone in a leather chair, turning something over and over in his hands. A stage hand walked past and glanced at what Clint was holding. A silver compass, old military issue, the kind soldiers carried in Korea. The stage hand had never seen Clint Eastwood look nervous before, but the man's jaw was clenched and his eyes kept darting to the monitor showing the empty stage. At 5:15 p.m., Johnny walked past the green room. The door was open. Clint looked up. Their eyes met. No words, just a single nod. A nod that said, "Tonight we break 21 years of silence." The show began at 5:30 p.m. exactly. Johnny's monologue was fine. Jokes about Watergate, about gas prices, about the World Series. The audience laughed, but Ed McMahon noticed Johnny kept glancing at his jacket pocket, kept touching something inside it. The first guest was singer Helen Reddy. She performed Delta Dawn. Johnny barely listened. During the commercial break, he leaned over to the show's producer. "When Clint comes out, don't cut to commercial no matter what happens. I don't care if we run over. You keep those cameras rolling." The producer started to ask why, but Johnny's expression stopped him. "Just do it." Ed leaned in close. "Johnny, you're sweating. You never sweat." Johnny looked at his co-host and oldest friend. "Ed, in about 4 minutes, you're going to learn something about me I've never told you, and I'm sorry it took this long." At 6:02 p.m., Ed McMahon's voice boomed across the studio. "Ladies and gentlemen, you know him as the man with no name, the star of the Dirty Harry films, one of the biggest box office draws in the world. Please welcome Clint Eastwood." The audience erupted into applause. Doc Severson's band launched into the theme from The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. Clint walked out from behind the curtain, moving with that slow, confident walk that had made him a legend. But something was different. His right hand was in his jacket pocket, and when he reached Johnny's desk, he extended his left hand for the handshake. Johnny stood, looked at Clint's left hand, looked into his eyes, and then Johnny spoke into the microphone, so every single person in America could hear him. "Not this time, Clint." The audience gasped. Ed McMahon's mouth fell open, and what happened next would be replayed on news broadcasts for the next 50 years. 3 seconds of absolute silence. On live television, 3 seconds feels like an eternity. Clint Eastwood's hand remained extended in the air. The audience didn't know whether to laugh or stay quiet. This wasn't part of the script. This wasn't how tonight's show interviews started. Johnny reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a military medal. He held it up to the camera. The lights caught the purple ribbon, the gold star, the profile of George Washington, a Purple Heart. The audience's confusion deepened. Johnny Carson had a Purple Heart. Why had nobody ever known this? "This doesn't belong to me," Johnny said, his voice steady but different from his usual playful tone. "This belongs to Sergeant William Morrison, United States Army Korean War. And right now, Dutch Morrison is lying in a hospital bed at the Cedar Rapids VA in Iowa with stage 4 lung cancer. His doctors say he has less than 2 weeks to live." You could hear people in the audience inhale sharply. This wasn't a comedy bit. This was real. Johnny looked directly at Clint. "He sent you a telegram too, didn't he?" Clint nodded slowly. Then he pulled his right hand from his pocket and held up the silver compass. "Yeah, he did." Ed McMahon whispered from his chair, "Johnny, what is this?" Johnny turned to face the audience, the camera, the millions watching at home. "Ladies and gentlemen, before I shake Clint Eastwood's hand tonight, you need to hear a story. A story about the bravest man I ever met. A man who asked Clint and me to never speak his name in public. And for 21 years we honored that promise. But yesterday, Dutch Morrison released us from our silence because he's dying and he wants America to know that men like him existed." Johnny gestured for Clint to sit. Clint moved to the guest chair, but this wasn't a typical interview anymore. This was something else entirely, something the audience could feel shifting in real time. December 14, 1951, Johnny began Seoul, South Korea. I was a 26-year-old Navy ensign stationed on the USS Pennsylvania. We were doing reconnaissance work off the Korean coast, and I got sent inland for liaison duty. Clint here was a 21-year-old Army private drafted in 1950, working in a logistics unit. Clint spoke for the first time since sitting down. "I was terrified every single day." The audience had never heard Clint Eastwood admit fear. The man who stared down criminals in movies, who played the toughest characters in cinema, was confessing he'd been scared. Johnny continued, "We both ended up at a rest and recreation center in Seoul for 48 hours of leave. We met at a makeshift USO bar. We were just two guys from small towns trying to forget about the war for 2 days. And then this giant of a man walked up to us." Johnny's voice changed when he said the next part, softer, full of something that might have been grief. "Sergeant William Morrison, 6'4", farm boy from Nebraska like me. He was covered in combat ribbons. This was his second tour. He'd volunteered to stay after his first 18 months because he said the young kids being shipped over needed someone who knew how to keep them alive." Clint leaned forward. "Dutch bought us drinks, told us stories that made us laugh for the first time in months. And he said something I've never forgotten. He looked at both of us and said, 'War is going to take enough from you. Don't let it take your humanity.'" Johnny nodded. "For 3 days in Seoul, Dutch became like an older brother to us. He told us we were going to survive the war, that we'd go home and do something that mattered. We thought he was crazy." The audience was completely silent now, listening, absorbing. February 8, 1952. Johnny said, "Hill 418 near Corinth. Clint's logistics unit was delivering supplies to a forward position. I'd been sent inland again for coordination work, and Dutch's infantry unit was defending that hill." Johnny paused. His hand tightened around the Purple Heart. At 2:00 in the morning, Chinese forces launched a surprise assault. Hundreds of soldiers coming over that ridge in the dark. I was in a command bunker watching it happen, and Clint was trapped in a supply depot 200 yards away with no cover. Clint's voice was quiet. "I thought I was dead. Dutch's unit got the order to fall back," Johnny continued. "The hill was lost, but Dutch saw Clint pinned down and he saw me trying to figure out how to reach him. So Dutch disobeyed a direct order. He ran into the open into enemy fire. He reached Clint first, dragged him toward the bunker. I ran out to help even though I was Navy and had no business being in ground combat." Johnny looked at Clint. Clint looked back. Both men's eyes were wet. "We made it to the bunker," Johnny said, "all 3 of us. but we were trapped with 47 other soldiers surrounded. Dutch took command because he was the highest-ranking NCO still alive, and for 6 hours he held that position. He personally manned a machine gun, took 3 bullets, shoulder, leg, abdomen, but he didn't stop until reinforcements arrived at dawn. The audience was openly crying now. So was Ed McMahon. When the medics got to Dutch, he was lying in his own blood, Johnny said, and he looked up at me and Clint and said, "You two are going to make it. You're going to do something that matters. Promise me you'll make it count." Clint spoke through tears. "We promised right there on that hill. We swore to him we'd make our lives count." Dutch survived, Johnny continued. He got a silver star and this Purple Heart. But a month later, when he was recovering in a Seoul hospital, he made us promise something else. Johnny pulled the telegram from his pocket and read aloud. He said, "Don't tell anyone about Hill 418. If you become famous someday, don't make me part of your story. I don't want the spotlight. I want to stay in the field and keep doing my job. The minute my name gets in the papers, they'll pull me out of combat. And there are 18-year-old kids over here who need someone who knows how to keep them alive." The weight of those words settled over the studio like a blanket, Clint added. So we promised. We shook his hand and swore we'd never speak his name publicly. Johnny held up the Purple Heart. "Dutch gave me this medal and told me to hold it until he asked for it back." Johnny's voice cracked. He never asked. He just kept serving. 3 tours in Korea, 2 tours in Vietnam. He retired in 1968 with 23 years of service. Never married, never sought recognition, never told his story. Johnny looked directly into the camera. "For 21 years, Clint and I both became successful. We made money. We won awards. We got famous, and every single day we knew it was because a farm boy from Nebraska bled on a frozen hill for 2 kids who didn't matter to anyone." Clint pulled out his own telegram. "Yesterday, Dutch released us. He wrote, 'I'm dying. Tell America the truth. Tell them the forgotten soldiers mattered.'" And then Johnny said the words that would change everything. Dutch didn't just release us from silence. He gave us one more mission, and we're going to complete it right now. Live on television. Johnny stood up from behind his desk. Clint stood up from the guest chair. They faced each other in front of 30 million viewers. 2 of the most famous men in America standing like soldiers about to receive orders. Dutch Morrison's telegram had 3 requests, Johnny said, his voice strong now, filled with purpose. 3 final missions for the 2 soldiers he saved 21 years ago. Johnny read from the telegram. "First, Johnny, use your platform to tell Korean War stories. Interview veterans, make them visible. We're called the Forgotten War, and our soldiers are dying thinking nobody remembers." The audience began to understand this wasn't just a story. This was a call to action. "Second," Johnny continued, "Clint, you make movies about tough guys. Make one about Korea. Show what it was really like. Show the 18-year-old kids who froze in foxholes and came home to nothing." Clint spoke directly to the camera. "I give you my word, Dutch, that film gets made." And third, Johnny said, his voice rising, "Both of you establish something permanent, a fund, a foundation, something that lives longer than all 3 of us, something that takes care of the Korean War veterans who came home broken and forgotten." Johnny looked at Clint. Clint nodded. And then Johnny did something unprecedented in television history. He looked directly at the camera and said, "We're announcing it right now. Dutch Morrison Veterans Fund. Clint and I are each pledging $50,000 as seed money. The mission is simple. Support Korean War veterans with medical care, mental health services, and family assistance." The studio audience erupted into applause, but Johnny held up his hand. "We're not done. We're going to do something else we've never done on The Tonight Show." Johnny turned to his producer off camera. "Get me the VA hospital in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. Get me Sergeant Morrison's room." Right now, the audience gasped. Was this really happening? Was Johnny Carson about to call a dying veteran live on national television? For 90 seconds, America watched in silence as the call connected. Doc Severson played soft music. The phone rang through the studio speakers. A nurse answered. "Cedar Rapids VA Oncology Ward." Johnny's voice was gentle. "This is Johnny Carson. I need to speak with Sergeant William Morrison. It's urgent." A long pause. Then, "Mr. Carson, the Johnny Carson." "Yes, ma'am." "Please, it's important." Another 30 seconds of waiting. Then a weak, raspy voice came through the speakers. "Johnny." The sound of Dutch Morrison's voice broke something in the studio. People were openly sobbing. "Dutch," Johnny said, his voice shaking, "I'm here with Clint. We're on the Tonight Show right now. 30 million people are watching." Dutch's voice was barely a whisper. You told them." Clint leaned to the microphone. "We told them everything, Sergeant Hill 418. The promise, all of it." There was a long silence, then the sound of Dutch Morrison crying. Not sad crying, something else, relief maybe, or gratitude. "You didn't have to do this," Dutch whispered. Johnny's response was firm. "Yes, we did. You earned it. You earned all of it. And we're launching a fund in your name tonight, starting right now." Dutch's voice cracked. I didn't want to die forgotten. I didn't want all of us to be forgotten." Clint spoke next, and his voice carried the weight of 21 years. "You will never be forgotten, Dutch. We promise you that. This nation will remember. We're making sure of it." Johnny added, "Thank you for keeping us alive. Thank you for making us promise to live well. We're keeping that promise right now in front of the whole country." Dutch Morrison's final words were